Here's the deal. I don't care how big and strong you are. If you get tired, if you gas out, all that strength means nothing. So for today, we're covering my 4 favorite ways to tire out your opponent. You white belts are gonna love this stuff. I wish I would have known half of this when I started. Let's jump in. On top of completely zapping our opponent's strength, why else would we want to tire him out? Well, I'll tell you, when you're tired, you're sloppy and you're uncoordinated. And when you're tired, you tend to make really bad decisions. So you combine all these things together and you put yourself in a very advantageous position to score points or even submissions. Tip number 1, breaking down your opponent's posture from standing. See, the way muscles work, the bigger the muscle is, the more oxygen and blood it requires. We can leverage that to our favor against our opponent. So the idea with this tip is to make your opponent engage his back muscles, specifically his posterior chain, more than he normally would. This can exhaust your opponent because it's making bigger muscles work more. And how we do this is actually very simple. What I want to do is obtain some collar ties, and not just any collar ties, but I want to have heavy collar ties. I want to get his posture broken down. I want to get him leaning forward. That's going to make him engage a lot of those posterior chain muscles that are larger and require more oxygen. I can hang on him. I can perform snap downs. I can look to snap down to a front headlock and start working submissions even that way. But if my opponent that I'm going against is strong, this is a great way to start to wear him down even early on in the match. One thing I should point out that you need to be aware of, and one thing I specifically watch for when I go heavy on the collar ties, specifically with a wrestler, is I might be able to get away with that once or twice. Normally, if it's a good wrestler, they're going to develop that pattern. They're going to see what I'm trying to do. And when I go to reach for those collar ties, they may tap and shoot, right? So you need to be ready to sprawl back at all times, especially with the wrestlers. One thing I really enjoy about breaking down an opponent's posture, outside of it wearing him down, if he respects it. If he doesn't respect it, you're putting him in a position to ankle pick him or shoot a duck under or some kind of offensive takedown where it puts you in a position of advantage. Really, you're putting your opponent in a position to make some kind of a decision. He can either try to weather the storm, and honestly, this is what I want, because if you try to just correct your posture over and over again, you're gonna tire out. You also give him the option of potentially shooting a double leg, which you have the opportunity of stuffing, because as we know, shooting double legs can be exhausting unless you're really, really good at them. Number 3, he can try to duck out or duck under. Again, though, if he's tired and doing this, there's a chance that it's going to be sloppy. There's a chance that he's going to make a mistake, right? Which you can capitalize on. So as long as you're aware and careful of his offensive options, you're in a great position to wear this guy down, and that's exactly what we want. Tip number 2, exhausting our opponent from the ground. Now, side body is among some of my favorite positions. Specifically here, we're looking at Kesagatami. This is a great position because we can really anchor and drop our weight from our ribs into his ribs while he's sandwiched between us and the floor. Because he is sandwiched between my body weight and the floor, we are constricting his lungs' ability to expand completely, which makes it a lot more difficult to catch your breath. Now, could I get a submission here? I've seen it happen. It's not very common, but really the idea is to just make his life a little bit more difficult, right? Now, because I'm not sandwiched between 2 objects, I'm only applying downward pressure, I can still breathe. There's nothing on top of me constricting my lungs. So while I catch my breath, I'm zapping his energy. Another position where we see this happening is knee on belly, especially if you can establish a grip near his collar and another grip on his gi pants. We are applying downward pressure through our knee into his torso, constricting his lungs, disabling their ability to inflate completely, which increases the demand for oxygen in his system. And if he doesn't know the escape for this position, which most people don't unless they are blue belt and beyond, maybe sometimes purple belt and beyond, depending on where you train, he's probably going to squirm around and thrash around and wear himself out, increasing the demand for blood and oxygen to his muscles. But his lungs are already constricted. So you can see how these 2 things combined could really wear someone out. It's a beautiful thing, especially if you're going against someone who's stronger than you. This is a very powerful position. One way you can make this extra mean is by timing your pressure. So as you can see here, my buddy Nate is on knee on belly. He is waiting for me to breathe in deeply. Once he sees that, he applies intense downward pressure through his knee into my torso, disabling my ability to breathe in completely. In fact, what he's doing is forcing me to exhale but because I'm tired, I so badly want to inhale. So I think you could see how this could become a problem for the guy on the bottom. This one is a little mean, so if you want to have good gym etiquette, I wouldn't spam this on your buddies at your gym, but next time you compete or you need it in a self-defense scenario, by all means have at it. Tip number 3, which is probably one of my favorites, interrupting his pocket of oxygen. So you've probably noticed when you were sparring or even competing, at one point in the gi, if a lapel draped over your face in the bottom position and you were tired, just the fact having that gi laying over your face made breathing that much more difficult. It wasn't suffocating you, it wasn't choking you, it was just laying across your face, and it made breathing that much more difficult. That's because it was interrupting your pocket of oxygen. One easy way I like to visualize this is if I pretend I'm holding a big invisible apple, and I take that apple and I put it up against my mouth. This right here is what I like to consider my pocket of oxygen. If something gets in the way or interrupts that pocket, especially if I'm tired, I really suffer. The beautiful thing is there's opportunities for this all over the place in Jiu Jitsu. A couple specific areas that we can cover. Think about side body. I've got a good shoulder crunch, good shoulder pressure on the guy's face. I can collapse my head over his mouth and nose area, and if I get close enough, it makes breathing really difficult for him, especially if he's tired. Another area we see this is maybe in north-south, right? And I can't get the choke. I can just drape my gi over his face as I choke him, and even if it's more of a crank, if he's tired, that gi being there, it's the silliest thing in the world, it becomes a major problem. A more obvious example, as you see here, your opponent takes your back and they cup their hand and cover your mouth and nose. Now, I don't believe this is legal in all tournaments and or at all belts, so you need to be careful in competing and using this, but if you're messing around with your buddies, I think this one's pretty funny. I think as far as gym etiquette goes, you're not violating too much gym etiquette by doing this one. I've always gotten a good laugh, whether I was the victim or the perpetrator in this scenario. And really, if you're on your opponent's back, it doesn't necessarily need to be your cupped hand over his nose and mouth. You could have your forearm pressed across his nose and covering his mouth slightly, and that's enough to interrupt that flow of oxygen, making it so much more difficult to breathe. And now that we're talking about this, you're probably reminiscing of a time where you were competing or sparring, and this had happened to you and you had no idea why you couldn't breathe. And now you know why. If that's the case, I want to hear about that experience in the comments, because we're all trying to learn and grow here. But if there are more awkward or hilarious ways to interrupt someone's breathing, personally, I want to know about it, and I'm sure there's others that do too. And I just want to take a quick second to give my sponsor, X Martial, a shout out. X Martial does more for the community than any other brand out there. They sponsor over 300 athletes of all levels, and they even work with kids to help them on their martial arts journey. They've given away over $10,000 in gear in 2023. So if you want to look as good as me and probably even better, get over to X Martial now and start your shopping. They're always running some kind of a deal. You can also use my discount code IRONWILL to save yourself some money. All right, well, I think that covers it. Let's jump back to the video. Last but not least, number 4, mount with double underhooks. Now this is one I've seen Gordon Ryan do plenty of times, and for good reason. If you can score the double underhooks and maintain mounts, you're in a great place to conserve your energy while using minimal energy to maintain this position, while the guy on bottom is struggling and using maximum energy with very little efficiency. Those double underhooks really prevent your opponent from being able to get his arms back down into a safe position. And guess what muscle group they're using while attempting to get their arms back into a safe position? It's a large muscle group, your latissimus dorsi. Okay, again, remember from the beginning of the video, we talked about larger muscles require more blood and more oxygen. And if we can force our opponent to ineffectively use larger muscle groups, they burn out much faster. All the while, we have the opportunity to interrupt his pocket of oxygen from this position, making it a double whammy. What's really interesting about this one is that I've seen people submit to this, and it's not a submission. People as early as white belt all the way up to the very best in the world. So at the end of the day, you may have people say that this is cheap, tiring out your opponent, but for me, this is strategy, especially if I'm going to be dealing with someone who's bigger, faster, or stronger. Whether you're sparring with your buddies, you're competing for that gold medal, or you're in the street actually defending your safety or maybe some of your loved one's safety, you're gonna want every edge you can get, and this is one way to do it. Add this one to your arsenal or don't. But if you do or already have, I want to hear about it in the comments, guys. Again, we're trying to make a community here where we can all learn from each other. right? I'm just one guy, I'm one perspective. Some of you blow me away with the knowledge that you share. So keep that coming. And with that, you know how we like to end them, sometimes backwards, always forwards. I'll catch you guys in the next one.